All right. You want to know about Paul Duffy? Okay, I'll tell you. Well, let's start at the beginning. Paul Duffy. Paul Duffy was a mythical figure. I had only heard about Paul Duffy. His little brother Tim Duffy um, talked about him with such reverence. And I had really loved Woody Guthrie. I very much wanted to hot box cars and hitchhike all over the United States and build my memory full of all the things that it would take to write great songs, to encompass the emotions and the experiences, and then be able to convey that to others through music. And so when I heard about Paul Duffy, Tim said he's the closest thing to a real live Woody Guthrie that I would ever meet. And so I had only heard about him for a long time, but other people would play his songs. The Toaster song, that's one of Paul's songs. Lady Bird, that's one of Paul's songs. And I went with Tim and Denise and Scott Sharp up to the New River. We were staying with some people, Deb and Bert, and he had taken a 2x8 and two inner tubes and took a 5-gallon bucket and cut it to make a seat and made like these great big boats, like two inner tubes with a board across it and a bucket. And he took little pieces of a 5-gallon bucket and screwed it onto sticks so that we had paddles so we could go down the river on our inner tubes. And we were up there, and at the time, Tim Duffy and I would go in on cases of organic vegetables and fruit and rice and all kinds of stuff like that. So we had all this stuff up there. Tim and I were going through a juice fast, just juicing everything we could. And that was the first time I ever met the great Paul Duffy. As I recall, he was up there, and it was a big deal. It was everything that I expected him to be. He was extremely charming and a very handsome man, and just polarizing, captivating. His vibration, you listened when Paul was talking. We all would just listen because he had been traveling. That's before I met Dangerous Dave McGrew, who was Paul's good buddy. And I remember that my friend Scott Sharp and I, we were nervous. We wouldn't play music in front of nobody. We were scared. We were nervous. Everybody else sit around the fire playing songs and everything, and I wouldn't do it. So Scott and I would go up and hide behind the barn and try to practice out something we might have learned down there watching them around the fire, and then we would go sneak up behind the barn and practice. And Paul or Tim, one, walked up there to take a piss and saw us back hiding behind the barn. They were like, "Hey, you little boogers, up here damn playing music, get down there around the fire and play music. You think you're too cool, you won't come down there and play songs for us?" So that really helped us like get out of our shell and go play music for people. And looking back, yeah, that was cool. And I had always heard about this song called Ted the Talking Toaster, and Tim would always talk about it, and some of his friends would say it's like one of the greatest songs one of the great songs Paul wrote. And to me, I just thought it sounded great, and I could hear people that would play little pieces of it. I never completely understood. Never could get it, but it was a great mythical song that someday I hoped I would learn to play. And so when I finally got to meet Paul Duffy in person, I talked about it that night off and on, and And I said, I want to learn the great Ted the Talking Toaster, Paul. I want to learn that song. And finally, he walked up behind the same barn that me and Scott had been hiding behind and said, all right, Abe, I'm going to play you this song one time, and don't you ever ask me to do it again. So that's how I got the great Paul Duffy to play me Ted the Talking Toaster. And I will share that with you now. I got up early for breakfast this morning. Could have sworn I heard my toaster snoring. Tried to unplug it, thought it might be broken. It's when I heard those first words spoken. He said, good morning, my name is Ted. Hey, won't you give me some Wonder Bread? And I'm a hungry talking toaster, man. You know you got to keep me fed. Well, you know it nearly blew me out of my socks when I realized that my toaster could talk. Imagine the surprise when I discovered such a thing. The toaster stopped talking and started to sing. He sang the blues, so sweet and sad. Made my blender mad. I said, shut up, you old blender. You know my toaster don't sound bad. Well, I knew my talking toaster was gonna be a sensation, so I thought he might could use some good old-fashioned inspiration. So I rolled him up a joint, and he started puffing and writing down poems on my English muffins, and then pretty soon he wrote a whole book. And he was writing just as fast as he could cook. I'm singing about my talking toaster, everybody come and take a look. Well, he had him a best-selling book, and he had a song on the charts. I thought that nothing could tear me and my toaster apart. The public loved him and they thought he was great. They went and made Ted a presidential candidate. He's kissing babies and shaking hands, and on tour with his brand new toaster band. Well, pretty soon he'll be in Washington, making the laws of our land. But Ted doesn't visit. Ted doesn't write. My bread it ain't toasted and I'm lonesome at night. I feel so blue that it's hard for me to go on without waking up to good old Ted's happy song. Man, he used to make such incredible sounds while he would toast up my bread nice and brown. But I'm still gonna run against him when the next election rolls around. Man, I forgot a verse. I always leave this verse out. Or I try not to. It's the best one of the. It's all good. Imagine my surprise when I discovered such a thing. The toaster stopped talking and started to sing. He sang the, oh yeah. Yeah, I did it. Okay, I think that's entire. I think that might be the entire song, Ted the Talking Toaster. Gotta ask Timmy. But so later on through the years, I had a big old story off and on here and there, and we contacted each other right before my mother died. I started talking to Paul again. We reconnected on Facebook during COVID. I started doing live shows on Facebook for people that couldn't get out, and all my gigs were canceled. And Paul got in touch with me, and he was real sad. He was really bummed out. He was talking not good thoughts. And I said, well, hey, man, I'll play one of your songs every dead-burn day on Facebook if that'll make you feel any better. And so that's what I did for a couple of years. Over 1,000 episodes. I'd get up every day, and Paul started sending me handwritten copies of his songs. And then we would talk on the phone for hours and hours. And finally, I said, well, shoot, man, I got a friend that'll get me there and drive me around. And I ain't good at none of that stuff anymore, getting on airplanes. I used to do it all. I guess I can still do it, but I like to have somebody help me out with it. And so we went down there. I had been playing this song. At the end of my show every day, I would play Lady Bird. And I just loved it, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what Chinati Hot Springs was. I'd never ridden down the River Road. Never seen the Rio Grande that I could remember. And I'd never been to Presidio. I didn't know what all this stuff meant. So I said, well, I'm gonna come down and see you, the great Paul Duffy. So you get ready, here I go. We got down there, he lives way down in the canyon. He had changed his name to Pablo Menudo. Everybody there knew him as Pablo Menudo. And went down there and stayed with him for a while, interviewed him. He would write out all the questions that he wanted me to ask him, and sit me down and I would interview him. And, you know, put it all on Facebook Live so we could go back and watch it all. And it was cool. And they just loved him down there, man. As soon as they found out some people were down there to study the great Pablo Menudo, they would, people just started showing up. It turned into a little bit of a party, wild and crazy party. And I went and got a motel room that night, and you know, everything was all spread out, so I was walking around the parking lot looking for my room. And here comes a sheriff pulling up in one of them great big Tonka trucks with the tires and everything. The high sheriff of Terlingua pulled up and he goes, what are you doing out here, young man? I said, actually, looking for my motel room. He said, why are you in Terlingua? I said, I'm here studying the great Pablo Menudo. I call him Paul Duffy. He's my friend. I've known him for many years. And he said, hop up here in the truck. And he took me right to my hotel room. But man, that big sheriff's truck was full of all the police computers and stuff. I could barely squeeze in there with my guitar. But I ended up going to Presidio and eating a burrito. I went to Chinati Hot Springs and spent the night in the little dwelling that Dangerous Dave McGrew and Paul Duffy built. And Chinati Hot Springs is a natural hot springs out in the desert. You could walk through all the like cowboy movie stuff, like killer desert stuff. It was great. And I wasn't prepared. Like, I didn't bring a bunch of food. I didn't know what I was getting into because you're out in the middle of nowhere. And if you ain't got nothing, you can't get nothing. And the people that were staying there, when they would leave, they would just give us all their leftovers and everything. So we were just taken care of. It was a magical time. I rode down the River Road. I hung out on the Rio Grande. Terlingua, Texas is about 6 miles north of the Mexican border. So this is Lady Bird. Rio Grande, River Road, Chinati Hot Springs, and Presidio. Everything that I say is the funniest thing she ever heard. She never stops laughing. Lady Bird, she's a lady. Rio Grande, River Road, Chinati Hot Springs, and Presidio. Yeah, she could tell a dirty joke, never say a dirty word, she never stops laughing. Lady Bird, she's a lady, yes ma'am. Rio Grande, River Road, Chinati Hot Springs, and Presidio. Yeah, everything that I say is the funniest thing she ever heard. She's a lady, Lady Bird. And that's Lady Bird by the great Paul Duffy.